And welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. Network Africa begins in Côte d'Ivoire, where at least 13 people are reported to have died and many others missing. The landslide occurred on the northern outskirts of Abidjan, where, according to the country's weather service, saw more than 3 times as much rain between June 12 and 15 than is usual. The West African nation has been experiencing torrential rains, and a local administrator is quoted as saying 20 houses were swept away. Residents have been digging through mud also to search for their missing relatives. Well, let's get more on this from Liane Do Bassompierre. She's a journalist based in Abidjan. Hello, Liane. Thanks for speaking to us.
Very nice to be on the program. Thank you.
Now, what is the latest with the victims of this disaster, especially with those who are still missing?
Well, as you rightly said, there are 13 people that have been pulled out of the rubble. The search continues for more. It's not exactly sure how many people or bodies that is they are looking for, but we know that 100 families have been affected. Some 600 people have been moved to a local Catholic church where government has provided them with food parcels while they await plans for the next step. Of course, many of those houses are unsalvageable. There's more rain on the way as well. So not a good time for them to start rebuilding or trying to find some of the things that went missing in the wreckage.
Well, now, we also understand that there have been unusual heavy downpours this week in the country, which have been predicted by the Weather Service. With this unfortunate incident, does this mean the government wasn't prepared for this?
I don't think that's the case at all, because actually early on in this week, the government had actually said that they had made several key works across the city, because we know that 2 years ago, 19 people actually perished in flash floods and landslides, excuse me, in the country. And this time around, they were prepared. Monday morning's headlines saying, areas that had been previously prone to flash floods have now not been affected at all. And this came as quite a surprise that this railroad area in the suburb of Anyama in Abidjan was so badly affected.
And this must be a frustrating time for the victims, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. Will there be any compensation from the government, perhaps, for those who've lost their homes and their livelihood? Because even farmers are concerned for their crops as the rains continue.
So, as I said, more than 600 people have been moved to the hall of a nearby Catholic church. Government has provided them with food parcels in the meantime. There's been no talk as yet of any further compensation. There is some talk that they've already been getting something from government with regards to the COVID plan that's already been in place. We're yet to get more details of what's going to be provided for these families. Of course, it's not just COVID. With the rainy season comes an increased risk of malaria. So there's that other battle that they need to be fighting at the same time.
All right, finally, Liane, please bring us up to speed with the COVID-19's Côte d'Ivoire's fights, I beg your pardon, against coronavirus.
Well, as of yesterday, the figures were 6,444 confirmed cases and 49 deaths. Government has put the state of emergency, that is, has been extended till the end of this month and could be extended even further. We do know that not many people have been adhering to the mandatory masks. Government has said that they will be enforcing this a bit more, but in their daily press conference last week, they said, not even 50% of people of the population are wearing the masks, which is a good way in which to mitigate the spread of the virus.
All right, then, Liane Do Bassompierre, journalist in Abidjan, thank you so much for speaking to us on Network Africa. Let's talk politics now. The opposition members of parliament in Malawi have passed a resolution setting a new date for a fresh presidential election. Malawians will now go to the polls on the 23rd of June, a week earlier than initially ordered by the courts, which annulled President Peter Mutharika's narrow election victory last year. The initial date was July 2nd. In February, the Constitutional Court ruled that a new election should be held within 150 days, citing widespread, systematic and grave irregularities when it annulled the votes that returned Mutharika to power. Recently, Mutharika appointed a new chairman of the Malawi Electoral Commission, Justice Chifundo Kachali, who says his team is ready for Tuesday's election, even though ballot papers for the rerun are yet to arrive. President Mutharika's win was challenged by his rivals Lazarus Chakwera and Saulos Chilima, who have now formed an alliance for the rerun. Well, Kenya has been elected as a member of the United Nations Security Council for a 2-year term, following a second round of ballots at the General Assembly to determine the remaining seats for the Africa, Asia and the Pacific group. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the election was held by secret ballot without a plenary. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta has described the win as a demonstration of the country's growing profile and influence in the Committee of Nations as a steadfast and dependable development partner. Kenya defeated Djibouti in the runoff vote and will replace South Africa in the non-permanent seats starting January 2021. Niger and Tunisia are the other representatives of the African continent.
Number of members present and voting, 191. Required two-thirds majority, 128. Number of votes obtained, Kenya 129, Djibouti 62. Having obtained the required two-thirds majority of members present and voting and the greatest number of votes, Kenya is elected a member of the Security Council for a 2-year term beginning on 1 January 2021. I congratulate Kenya on its election as a member of the Security Council.
As this year's World Refugee Day is marked in the midst of a coronavirus pandemic, the UN is warning of an increase in local transmissions and urging countries to continue preparing. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees is calling on members of the Security Council to depoliticize humanitarian issues, including issues related to refugees and their return. Speaking ahead of the World Refugee Day marked every 20th of June, he says the COVID-19 pandemic has stopped many things, but it doesn't seem to have stopped war that is causing the refugee crisis. According to Filippo Grandi, there needs to be a much more strategic application of development that tackles the root causes beside security.
We need a much more strategic application of development aid that tackles truly the root causes besides security, and that takes into account the growing displacement element of the crisis. The security responses, which have been in focus, which have been also at the center of your own discussions, must also protect civilians and must also allow for humanitarian access. There needs to be a more tailored, concerted effort to help states build or rebuild social cohesion between different groups.
Meanwhile, a new report from the United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, says the number of refugees worldwide has doubled in the past decade, with the hotspots in Africa being the Democratic Republic of Congo, Burkina Faso, and the wider Sahel region. Clementine Mweketa Salami, who's the director of the UNHCR's Regional Bureau in East Africa, the Horn, and the Great Lakes, said cases in Africa have nearly tripled in the same period, going from 2.2 million to 6.3 million. Weketa Salami also voiced concerns about the impact of COVID-19 on refugee camps, even though there have been no widespread outbreak. However, social distancing can be hard to maintain because of overcrowding.
On World Refugee Day, I think the message we have this year, notably that together we can make a difference and that every action counts, I think is one that should resonate in the hearts of most people globally. I would say more than it would have done in a year in which we were not all confronting the same situation. I think we are witnessing today record levels of forced displacement with almost close to 80 million people displaced worldwide. This breaks down as 1% of humanity. One person in every 97 persons is forcibly displaced. On the continent, we also see rising numbers. We started the decade with about 2.2 million. That has almost tripled. We are now close to 6.3 million. So the numbers are growing.
A UN report obtained by a French news agency outlines undeclared military aid to the Democratic Republic of Congo. The confidential report supplied to the UN Security Council says a large number of countries supplying weapons and training to the Congolese military have failed to notify the UN as required by a 2004 resolution. These include the United States, China, and South Africa, among others. The UN experts are monitoring sanctions against the country that expire at the end of June. We begin our coronavirus coverage with the latest figures from Africa. The continent's COVID-19 cases now stands at 277,185. From that figure, 141,771 are the active confirmed cases. More than 127,000 people have recovered, and the death toll stands at over 7,400. South Africa still has the highest number of cases on the continent, with 83,890 cases. It's followed by Egypt with 50,437 cases and Nigeria with 18,480 cases. Next is Ghana with 12,929 recorded cases, then Algeria, which has seen 11,385. Meanwhile, the countries with the most fatalities are Egypt with 1,938, South Africa 1,737, Algeria 811, Sudan 487, and Nigeria 475. While officials from South Africa, Morocco, and Zambia are hailing the extraordinary China-Africa Summit on solidarity against COVID-19, saying it was of unique significance, showcasing the strong friendship between China and Africa, as well as providing a renewed impetus for the collective efforts of China, Africa, and the rest of the world in the fight against the pandemic. The former diplomat of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation in South Africa, Gert Grobler, said the summit has shown the deep relationship between China and the continent, stating that the cooperation between the two sides will benefit the global community.
Conference really illustrates and proves the very close relationship and cooperation and friendship between China and Africa, and I think Africa and China could very constructively work together. For instance, on President Xi Jinping's initiative on health. Governance in the context of the Belt and Road Initiative. Africa knows that China is indeed a friend in need, and that perhaps China and Africa need each other more than ever before in recent history, for us to work together in the interest not only between China and Africa, but in the interest of the greater good, of the global good, and working towards a community with a shared future for mankind.
Ghanaian World War II veteran Private Joseph Hammond says he's overwhelmed and filled with joy after the news broke that the Queen had honored his fundraising efforts in the fight against COVID-19. He has been given the Commonwealth Points of Light Award, which recognizes inspirational volunteers throughout the Commonwealth. Now 95 years old, the veteran joined the Royal West African Frontier Force, aged just 16. Last month, he set himself a challenge of walking 3.2 kilometers every day to raise $600,000 to buy protective gear for health workers and vulnerable veterans. Private Hammond has so far raised $35,000. He was inspired by British veteran captain Sir Tom Moore, who raised more than $35 million for the UK's National Health Service. The Queen's grandson, Prince Harry, wrote Private Hammond a letter of encouragement and support earlier this month. Welcome to our Africa Tech segment. With schools closed, several students have had to transition to online learning to continue their education. To make this process easier for students, a group of young Nigerians came together to develop a continuous learning web app, providing free learning materials for them. In March this year, all schools in the country were shut as part of measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. Many students, teachers, and even parents were left with no choice but to opt for virtual learning. Sadly, not all have such privilege, causing them to pause their education indefinitely. But Julius Ilori, with some of his colleagues, have risen up to this challenge by developing this continuous learning platform, a web application that provides free educational materials to secondary school students, enabling them to study on their own at home.
The continuous learning web app we created was initiated as a response to the COVID-19 school lockdown that started in late March, and we came up with this initiative to complement the effort of the government to see how we can create a solution that can help people to keep accessing educational materials while they are still at home. So since we started this initiative, we have been able to reach over 1,000 young people in different parts of Nigeria.
Understanding that it's easier to access a mobile device than a laptop, the team deliberately designs the web app for mobile devices with an option to download the materials for offline use.
Initially, it was launched as an e-library so that students who log onto the platform can come in, look for educational materials of their choice, and then download them for offline use. In a bid for us to offer more to the students who were constantly interacting with the platform, we decided to add the feature whereby they could take mock tests. Now, on one click, these students get access and then they're able to test what they've learned.
As clamors increase for learning institutions to reopen, the federal government has rolled out guidelines that must be met by each school before that can happen. However, no set date has been released for students to return to schools, and applications like the continuous learning platform can help bridge the gap for the students, as well as prepare them for the post-COVID-19 era that will be driven by technological innovations. A Kenyan startup, Gumzo, is a minnow on the booming teleconferencing scene, but its creators are banking on several factors making it a winner. Its Canadian founder, Jay Shapiro, says hosts can hold unlimited meetings for $1 per week, less than a third of the price of Zoom. Jay Shapiro, also the founder of Nairobi-based Isuku Games, said he designed the app so companies can spend some of their cash in Africa, and the platform works on all mobile phones, not just smartphones.
Jay Shapiro, the creator of Gumzo, says he designed the teleconferencing app so companies can spend some of their cash in Africa, and the platform works on all mobile phones, not just smartphones.
In Africa, it's a mobile-first continent. And so our platform had to work and work well on a variety of phone interfaces. So we work through HTML5 on the browser with iPhones, Androids, older phones, new phones, small memory phones, and also we're doing dial-ins for people with older feature phones that they can still join the calls even if they don't have a smartphone.
Hello?
Ronald Mahondo, who runs an app-based taxi company, is already using Gumzo for his meetings.
We have found ourselves using video conferencing solutions more and more. And also, if you look at our team, a very small part of our team is the one that actually comes to the office. The bigger part actually work from home. We have already established the required protocols to ensure that we can be able to work remotely.
Gumzo is competing with tech giants including Zoom, Skype, and Facebook Messenger. But Shapiro is hopeful that new language platforms will set it apart.
So our platform's available in English, Swahili, and French for Francophone Africa already. We're adding Zulu, Hausa, and Pidgin in the next 2 weeks. And we really want to be across the continent and reaching as many communities as we can in local language.
Video conferencing has exploded globally due to COVID-19 lockdowns. But Gumzo must compete with tech giants such as Microsoft Core, Zoom Video Communications, Skype, and Facebook Messenger.
Well, that's it on the program today and for the week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke. Have a great weekend.